Come join us each week as we dive into topics about the joys and the struggles of motherhood. By no means are we experts. We're practically flying by the seat of our pants, or should I say, mom jeans. On this podcast, you will find a judgment-free zone where we discuss not only the best parts of being a mom, but the not-so-glamorous parts too. You can expect unfiltered, real mom talk, humor, grace, and a sense of sisterhood. What makes our podcast unique is that we understand there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to being a mother. We're not going to pretend that we know everything too, because we definitely don't. We just want a place to share our stories with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our Mom Jeans podcast. Today we've got myself, Michaela, as well as Lisa, Leah, and Danielle on. And today we are going to talk about, we're gonna kick off our topic of birth stories, starting with Danielle's birth story today. But before we jump into all those juicy details, just kind of curious, how has everybody's week been?
So we are working on transitioning Aubrey out of her swaddle. She is getting close. You can tell she's like kicking her legs a ton. So you know she's trying to like move. And if her arms are pinned down and she gets stuck on her front without being able to prop up, she could, get her face buried in that mattress, and we're not interested in that. So it was a little rough because she like is a flailer. She's throwing her arms all around and hitting herself in the face, and she doesn't like that very much. So then it wakes her up. But we found a star suit. It's called a star suit. Very appealing. It looks like a star. That's why it's called a star suit. And she, the first night, we were like, we're going to do the cry it out method. And it was 3 hours of on and off crying. And I think I cried as much as she did. I felt so guilty. And then yesterday she got her 4-month shots. She slept like a champ. She did not wake up at all because I think those shots wore her out. And tonight she put herself to sleep in that star suit. So fingers crossed that we keep rolling that way. That would be awesome. And then we are battling potty training issues right now with Hannah, but I was telling Leah, it's amazing. The Montessori way is just really like teaching them to do things for themselves and trying to be patient with them and let them do these things. And they kept saying, you have to let her dress herself. You have to let her dress herself. And we were like, come on, Hannah, you have to do this yourself. No, mommy do it. No, daddy do it. And we were getting really frustrated, and we had that check-in with each other and said, you know what? She's 2 years old. She's only 2 years old. She has plenty of time to dress herself. Let's stop putting the pressure on. And as soon as we stopped the pressure, she was like, I do it. And she puts her pants on backwards every single time, but at least she gets those pants on. So we're kind of going to take a step back, I think, with the potty training. We're going to keep going with the underwear because we need to support daycare for sure. They sent us an email today, and we're like, hey, how's potty training going at home? And we're like, all right, we got to support them and stop putting her in diapers at home and, sending her to school in underwear and like, oh, weird. I don't know why she's not potty trained there. She's so great at home. She's not. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to stop putting the pressure on her and kind of, let her go. It's a wild ride, I'll tell you that. But the pediatrician said, I'm surprised you're even trying. And so don't put a lot of pressure on her and let her lead the way. So we're trying to be patient with her, and, poor thing is wet all the time. So that's
out of curiosity, why did the pediatrician say that they were surprised? Just her age, or the fact that you've got another young kid at home? Okay.
Age, it's typically like around, of course, like we can go into our grievances about pediatricians again, but this pediatrician said, 3 years old is like the prime spot. Our daycare started, it's just what they do. They, all the kids are at like a 3-year range. So they kind of like have to do it. And if they see like the older kids going on the potty, but they don't go on the potty, like it's weird. So they just try. So Hannah started at this school at 16 months. And so they were trying right away. And we were like, this is insane. This is never going to happen. Right. So Yeah, and she, like, you can tell, like they say, like the tells that they're ready to potty train, all of those are starting to happen. So I'm like, okay, this is positive, and I talked to my sister-in-law, who their daughter's 6 months older, and she's 100% potty trained. But they said it literally was like night and day. One day she just woke up and was like, all right, I'm ready to be potty trained now, and I'm gonna do it. But they said it was like, it was pulling teeth for a while with her, and she just needed to be ready. She just wanted it. It's kind of like us, when we're ready to finally start eating well or working out and we're determined, we'll do it. But if we're not the ones ready to do it, we're not going to do it. So that's kind of where we're at with that, and just trying to be patient with her and remember she's 2.
So how does she do at school versus at home?
Before Aubrey was born, she was doing great. And we were warned, hey, she's going to definitely have a regression when Aubrey's born. It's like, it's going to happen. And daycare is starting to see a lot of what we're seeing, as it's going very poorly there too, to the point that they're sending us texts saying, like, what's going on? Why are we going backwards? When I actually, from, Dr. Google says she's getting closer based on the things that she's doing. Is starting, like, she used to pee in her pants and would sit in it for hours and didn't care. Now the second she pees, she's like, change diaper, change underwear. So I know she's progressing and she's getting there. It's just like, I don't know what daycare sees or how daycare processes that, but I know she's getting there, and I'm starting to finally, now that my child is a little bit over 2 years old, starting to realize that, you know what, these timelines are silly. It's silly to be like, oh, my child's not doing what everybody else's child's doing at this age, because she'll get there. It's just going to take her time, and such a freeing feeling when you're not like sitting there being like, oh, why isn't she keeping up with everybody else? She'll get there. I'm not worried. So anyway.
Yeah, we went to the pediatrician yesterday, and she asked us if Weston was doing a couple things, and I said yes. And then today over dinner, Stephen's like, I don't think he's doing that. And I was like, listen, I didn't want to hear that our child is behind. I didn't want to hear that he hasn't hit a milestone. Like, I will say yes. I just didn't care.
Yep. I think some of those pediatricians are awesome at, like, making you feel like your kid's the smartest, fastest, tallest, skinniest, best, whatever. And then others are like, oh, you should really be further. Once you take that pressure off yourself, it's so awesome. It's so freeing. It feels so great.
And everything will work out. Danielle, anything exciting going on in your week?
Well, yes. So this weekend we took Weston skiing. He was not in skis though, but Ryan wore him. We should have been doing this all ski season, because I was like worried. I'm like, no, I need to find someone to go ski with, because we can't take Weston, and I don't want to, like, we don't want to sit in the lobby or the ski area, waiting for the other person to come off the mountain. And actually, a girl that I work out with in those HIIT classes, she's like, why don't you just take him and wear him? I'm like, you wear your baby? And I'm like, do you put a helmet on him? And she's like, nope. And we just wear him, and we just go down the greens, and we take it slow. And she's like, it's great, because she has 2 older kids, one that is on a leash with skis and one that is skiing freely. And so I went home and I told Ryan, and I said, this girl I work out with, they wear their baby skiing. And he's like, well, let's do it. I'm like, really? Because I'm like very cautious about things and was super nervous about it. But he's like, yeah, people do it all the time. We can do it too. And so we went, and it was actually easier than we thought. Although we did only go down the slopes 4 times, because it was a whole marathon trying to walk to the ski like lifts and then walk back to the car, and lunchtime, and it started snowing. So our last lift, it started snowing. It was like hard pellets, like snow, and it was hitting Weston in the face, and we didn't have ski goggles for him. So he started crying up the chair, up the lift. And so Ryan took his goggles off and put it on him, and was trying to block the snow. So yeah, we're like, this is our last run. But it was just nice to try something different, or get out of the house and do something that we enjoy doing. So I feel like most of, I guess, early postpartum, I wasn't getting out and doing a lot of stuff or doing the things that we loved. So I just would encourage others to definitely try. Like, don't give up on the things that you do enjoy. Try to figure out ways to incorporate your baby. It's definitely going to look different. We had to take it slow. We got there later. We left early. We went down the mountain 4 times. But it was just exciting to experience that. So we did that, and then actually today I was sitting here actually doing something on my computer, and I'm in a bedroom, and there's like a keyboard that Weston will play with on the floor, and he sat on top of it, and he stood up, so he was kind of lifted up, so he stood up by himself and then walked, I think it's about like 10 feet away from me, and walked all the way over, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so of course I tried to get him to redo it. I would like put him, and then I had my camera, and he would stand up and then fall down. Or the one time he did do it again, I didn't hit record. I was like, you're doing great. And I'm like, oh,
Of course.
I'm not recording. So yeah, he likes to do things not when I like am recording. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then lastly, I know I've been talking about like putting myself out there, trying to make friends. And I do have friends, for people who are listening. I have friends, but they just don't live here in the area. I have one friend that like is a neighbor down the street, but other than that, I've been going to the HIT classes, and actually two separate occasions I've had some moms come up to me like, hey, can I get your number so we can schedule a play date? Or, I'd love to hang out. And it sounds like dating, but basically it is dating for friends. But I'm like, yes. And I came home, I'm like, Ryan, I was like, people like me. They asked for my number, and we're gonna schedule a play date for our kids. So that's cool. So if you are someone like me who feels isolated and is kind of an introvert and shy, I was just doing something that I love, working out, and it'll come naturally. So I would encourage anyone to do that, because it does get lonely and isolating. So yeah, that's me.
Do you feel like that makes you more inclined to reach out to somebody else and say like, hey, I want your phone number. Let's
Yeah,
do a play date.
I actually just did that a few weeks ago. A girl, she just moved here, and she was coming to the HIT classes, and she was pregnant. She actually just had her baby on the 28th. So she's like, I'm glad it wasn't the 29th of February, because it would have been leap year. And I was like, hey, can I get your number, or I can give you mine? And if you have any questions, because she was just moving to base finally after a month of living in a hotel. That's how it is. We're displaced when we move, and then just not knowing anyone. And so I was like, text me if you have, and she actually texted me today and was asking me about a pediatrician, and when it warms up, she wants to go for a walk and things of that sort. So that's unlike me to just be like, hey, can I get your number? So but she also seemed kind of shy and quiet, so I was like, she's my person, because I'm the same. So
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to make friends. So
Wesson turned 1 on Saturday, which was very exciting. We had our in-laws in town. Well, my in-laws in town. They stayed with us for the weekend, and then we had a little barbecue with a bunch of our friends. Stephen cooked some really, 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 really good food. I was so upset because we didn't have any leftovers afterwards, and I was so bummed because everybody ate it because it was so delicious. But it was super low key. It was very overstimulating for Weston. I will say that. Like, he's definitely not used to having that many people around, or that much excitement. And so, like halfway through the party, he needed a little extra quiet time. So he went and took an extra nap for the day. And he was unsure of his cake at first, but then we got to it. So that was good because I worked hard on it. I would have been bummed if he didn't eat any of it. But it was super fun. I'm glad we kind of took the time to just, hang out and celebrate. We got a lot of wine and booze, which was nice for Stephen and I. Obviously not for Wesson, because we had asked for no gifts because he doesn't need any more toys. We have so many things for him already. Like, one, we don't have the space for any more toys. Two, he plays with toilet paper rolls and pots and pans. So like, toys weren't necessary. So we got a good amount of booze, which was awesome.
with the exception of reimbursing. Well, I guess Michelle hooked him up with the gift that my husband stole from him
Yes,
on
we did
Christmas.
get a reimbursement gift of the basketball hoop, and Stephen and I have been playing with it a ton. But Wesson will take the ball and he'll put it in the hoop, so it's been really cute to see that too. So it was fun. I was kind of giggling to myself earlier today because I was like, it's just been such a long week that I thought we didn't record last week. And I was like, gosh, it's been like 2 weeks since we've recorded. No, it's just been a really long week. So, but yeah, it was a fun weekend, and now I'm working on getting the house clean and in order for us to go on our trip this weekend, which will be nice.
I will second the food being really good. It was so funny. She like picked up the brisket and just like taking full bites out of it, like crazy, and then taking the corn off the cob and just going to town on it. She loved the food. It was really good, and thank you for sharing his
Oh,
cake
that's
with
right.
her. She loved that
Yeah,
too. So it was a
Justin
great
told me at
party.
one point that he looked over at Hannah and she had like barbecue sauce all over her face.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yep.
theme was brisket, beer,
It's
and
awesome.
Wesson's first year.
I love that. That's awesome. That's so cute.
I'm sorry to have missed it, but I did also hear that the food was amazing.
That's amazing. Where were you, Michaela? I know.
Oh my gosh, where have I been? Um, I took a vacation with my husband to California this weekend and got to see a couple of my favorite old school bands. So it was a really fun concert and just a nice little getaway weekend with the husband, and then just got thrown right back into an extremely busy work week, but it's good. Otherwise, nothing too exciting
Do you have
going
any
on
more
here.
work trips coming up?
Oh yeah, there's a high likelihood that you'll see me recording from hotel rooms again here sooner than later. Glad everybody had an awesome week. As we've talked about, we're going to focus today on Danielle's birth story, and this her story of giving birth to her son is especially special to me because I am a little biased. He's family. She gave birth to my nephew, so hearing this story is really special and emotional and personal to me. So I'll kick it off to Danielle and let her walk you guys through her crazy journey of giving birth to her awesome little son.
All right. Well, I was telling Lisa actually before we started recording, I was like, I'm reading through the notes and I've really kind of just, it's all a blur now because it's almost been a year. And I feel like that birthing amnesia is real because it's like, yeah, that wasn't so bad. Have another one. It was fine. Because I was literally having to look at the notes. And there was one point, especially after several months after I gave birth, I feel like I couldn't even tell the story without crying or, just I didn't want to talk about it because I, even though everything turned out fine and everyone was good, it was hard. And then also before I even dive into this, I do want to acknowledge all the other moms out there that have different stories. Maybe they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, or I want to acknowledge those moms because in the grand scheme of things, when I'm like, oh, well, my story, I've heard other moms' stories. I'm like, well, mine wasn't that bad, or like I have a healthy baby. And so I just kind of want to bring light to that. And I just don't want to be insensitive. Okay. So last year I went into what I thought was labor. I started having contractions. It was kind of late at night, around 10 o'clock, and they were about 10 to 5 minutes apart. And they started getting more intense and intense. And at the time, I didn't know it was back labor, but it was like so painful in my back. I could barely like breathe through it. And like I said last episode, I just forgot how to breathe. I took all those classes. Kind of, it was informative, but I don't know if it was helpful in the moment. And So Ryan was like, you got to breathe through it. And so we had to wait until we were about 2 to 3 minutes apart on contractions for about an hour because the hospital is only 5 minutes away. So we waited, and about 2:30, I felt like they were 3 to 5 minutes apart, and I was like, I can't take this pain anymore. Like, we need to go. I just it was really painful.
What
as
was your due
contractions
date,
are.
and what was the day that you started having those contractions?
So my due date was March 5th, and I didn't feel like Weston was ready to make his debut. So actually, I think I had an appointment on March 6th, and I was still 1 centimeter dilated. So, and he hadn't dropped yet. I was still kind of carrying high, and so they scheduled an induction on the 13th. So I was going to be induced in the morning at 8 a.m. on the 13th. I was hoping that he would come naturally. So she did sweep my membranes. That didn't help either. And so just to kind of help the process along. That was really uncomfortable too. I don't know if I would do that again. It just kind of happened so fast. She's like, do you want me to sweep your membrane since I'm up here? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then just went for it. And I was like, that was really uncomfortable. So I was expecting, because I've had friends that have had that done, and then within 24 hours, they're having a baby. That didn't happen for me. And so this was the 9th. We were March 9th. We were I think Ryan re-enlisted into the Air Force that day. We went shopping, like we did all sorts of stuff. And then by the end of the day, so we'd been up all day, and I started having contractions at 10:30. So I haven't, so by 2:30, when we actually went to the hospital, I hadn't slept yet, and won't sleep for another good, probably 20 some hours. So yeah, so we went to the hospital. We drove there, and so I went into triage to see if they were going to admit me into the hospital. And they put the Doppler on you so you can hear the heartbeat. And every time I'd have a contraction, you could hear like Weston's heartbeat slow down a little bit. And I was asked, it's just a nurse, I'm like, is that normal? And I don't remember what her answer was, but she probably didn't answer because she's not a doctor. And so I was still, I think, only 2 centimeters dilated at this point. So I haven't went very far. I was like, oh, they're probably not going to admit me. But my contractions, again, were about 5 minutes apart. So she went and called the doctor, and then they came back and they're like, okay, we're going to admit you. And looking back, I think it was probably because his heart rate was dropping during the contractions. But they went ahead and put me on fluids. And when they did that, it actually made my contractions further apart. So I went back to 10-minute contractions. So I was actually able to get a little bit of sleep, I think for a couple hours with that, with just the fluids. And so by the next morning, when the nurse came in, the new nurse, she said, you're actually not in active labor. So we want to induce you. And I was like, I don't want to be induced. I would like to go naturally. So we're like, okay, well, we'll wait. But you're supposed to be induced on Monday. And this was Friday morning. And she's like, so there's really no point in like you going home and then coming back. And then looking back on it, I kind of wish maybe I did go home, but the contractions were pretty painful. So I'm like, okay. By 11 o'clock, they induced me, and they did it slowly with the Pitocin. So I'm like, don't give me the full thing. Let's just kind of ease into this. Because my expectation was, when I wrote my birthing plan, like I wanted to try to do all natural. I didn't want medication if possible. I just wanted to hopefully go natural, and that didn't happen for me. So they went ahead and they had to come back, and they're like, okay, your contractions are still not strong enough. They're still not close enough. We're going to have to give you a full dose.
Did you know about the Pitocin before? Or were you like Googling it while you were in the hospital? How did you know that you wanted to ease into it and not go full bore?
I probably didn't do as much research until after, but I just heard from other people. So then this is just word of mouth, not by a doctor, not by anyone, but I have heard that when you're induced, it's a lot more painful than if you're not. induced. So that's what I've heard, that contractions can be more painful if, you're induced.
Yeah, the science behind that is because your body doesn't get the opportunity to release the natural endorphins that come along with when your body goes into labor naturally. So that's why Pitocin contractions are considered to be more painful than natural labor contractions.
So that's kind of what I heard and what I thought. So I just wanted to try to go natural, and then epidural, obviously, when I felt like if I had to do it. But I had been all day, I had been refusing like pain medication, because they can give you pain medication as well. And the one that was written on the board is fentanyl. And when you see that, like, I know that there's the drug fentanyl, like that doctors can give you, but then there's like fentanyl on the street that, that your drug dealer can give you. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. So I'm like, nope, I'm good. So I had been refusing that all day, and that's important to the story for later. I was 3 centimeters dilated, so I wasn't ready yet. I was starting to have contractions.
Had Weston dropped by the time they decided to start the induction?
No, he was still pretty high, but I don't think I knew that he hadn't dropped until like a little later. But everyone kept saying like, he hasn't dropped yet. They haven't, like, no one, they're like, you're still carrying pretty high, like all week at work. So they're like, is he going to come out? I don't know. As I'm going through these contractions, they started getting like really painful. And I remember jamming to a playlist Michaela made me. She made me a baby push-in playlist.
Still a lot of songs from Lisa's playlist, and then I added it, changed some stuff up that I thought you'd like, Danielle. So
yeah,
thanks for letting us recreate that, Lisa.
That was awesome. So we were playing that on our speaker. We said that last week. Don't forget your speaker. I was singing No Scrubs. There's a video of me, and I'm like singing to it. I'm like, thanks, Michaela. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, another contraction's coming. And then I got the phone off. But he was really helpful through all those contractions, except when he would look at the monitor. He's like, oh, it looks like you're having another one. I'm like, I know. I can feel it coming on. You don't have to tell me. He's like, oh, sorry. I don't know what time it was by now. It was the afternoon. And eventually the pain got so bad. And I was having 1 to 2 minute contractions, like probably 1 minute. And I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like, let's get an epidural. Because they kept asking, do you need an epidural? Do you need the anesthesiologist to come in? And I was like, no, I can do it. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. I'm like, send him in. And so when I finally made that decision, they were like, we're sorry. He was pulled into the OR because an emergency surgery. I think a woman had given birth, but her placenta didn't come out. So they had to go surgically remove that. And so that's where he was. And I just started bawling. And the nurse was like, you've been doing so great. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to go through this pain anymore. It's rough. And it was so bad. I think it was about 2 hours, an hour to 2 hours later, he finally came in. And at that point, I was already 8 centimeters dilated. So I was actually surprised that they were going to give me an epidural. And so and I'm like scared of needles, but it wasn't that bad. And as soon as they gave me the epidural, like, I felt immediate relief. I'm like, wow. But as soon as I felt that immediate relief, you could hear like Weston's heartbeat was gone. They couldn't find it. And I felt like I was going to pass out. So all of a sudden now they're flipping me around. I'm on my knees. They're moving me around. And then I don't know how long it took them. I was like, where's his heartbeat? What's going on? Like tell me. And when stuff like that happens, they just stop talking to you, and they're just talking to each other. And it's like what could have been probably 10, 30 seconds felt like 5 minutes for me. I don't know. It wasn't that long, but that's how it felt. And they finally found a heartbeat, but it went from like the heartbeats on a Doppler is pretty fast, like da 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 da. It went da 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 da, like that slow. And I was like, oh my God, what? Like, is this my fault? I got like an epidural, and now his heart rate dropped. And all of a sudden I felt this rush of energy. So first off, this anesthesiologist would do things and I wouldn't know what was happening. You're going to find out. But I was like, I feel my heart is beating really, really fast. And he's like, yeah, I just hit you with hold on, let me tell you what it is. Atrophin. Yeah. So he hit me with atrophin, which is something to kind of like adrenaline, I guess, to get your heart rate back up, because I guess my blood pressure was dropping. So it was to help
Is it
get my
atropine or
blood pressure.
atropine?
Oh, atropine. Thank you. So he hit me with atropine, and that was to help get my blood pressure back up because had dropped. And so then the baby's heartbeat also dropped. And so as soon as they did that, his heart rate came back to normal and everything was fine. And so I'm like, okay, well, that was scary, but we made it through. And they're like, we're going to break your water, because my water hadn't broke. So they went ahead and broke it for me. And they were flipping me from side to side. And they were like just trying to get me ready, 10 centimeters dilated, ready to push. And the epidural helped a lot. I could feel contractions. It just felt like pressure if you've had one. And then I was like, wow, this is great. I should have got this sooner. And then finally the doctor came in and she had this like look on her face, like, just kind of disappointed. She said, the baby is -1, which I was like, I don't know what that means, but -1. So he hadn't dropped yet. And so she said, you're going to be pushing for 4 hours. And I'm afraid that what happened earlier is going to happen when you're pushing. His heart rate's going to drop. He's going to have a really hard time with labor. And we're going to have to go to an emergency C-section if that's the case.
I have a question. At
Okay.
this point, how many rounds of Pitocin had you had? Do you know?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I just know they gave me like half of a dose and they gave me the rest. That's a good question. I could look at my charts, but at the time, yeah, no clue. So then she was like, I think that we need to do a C-section. And of course, at that moment, I was just like, that's not what I planned for. I don't want a C-section. I don't want to be cut open. But she's like, at this point, you need to be thinking of the health of the baby and the health of you. She's like, I know that you're going to be pushing at least 4 hours. And that who's to say that it's not going to end up in emergency C-section. If we plan it now, then, we can prep you, we can take our time. And she's like, I'll just give you 2 minutes. And of course, like Ryan and I just started, mainly me was crying, and he's like, it's okay, like calming me down. And, but I was like, yeah, whatever we can do to get Weston out healthy is what we're going to do. So they started prepping us for a C-section. And I was like, hey, you need to text our family. And he's like, we'll just text them after we're out of the C-section. I was like, no, you need to text them and tell them we're going into a C-section. Like, this is like a major surgery. Please tell somebody. And he's like, okay, well. And he texted his dad, and my dad never looks at his phone. And so by the time I was in a C-section and my parents came into the hospital, they didn't even know I was in surgery. So we got prepped. I got nervous. And when I get nervous, I shake. But then also when you're about to give birth, you shake too. I don't know if anyone talks about that. I didn't know that until after. But when they put me on the OR table, I was like shaking like a fish almost out of water. Like I couldn't control my arms. And I just thought, I was like, okay, I just need to take a couple breaths. I need to calm down. By the time I was thinking that, all of a sudden the room starts spinning. I'm like, something's wrong. I was like, I feel high. Like the room is spinning. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And then the anesthesiologist, I'm having a hard time with that, said, oh yeah, I hit you with Demerol, which is a narcotic. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I hit you with Demerol because we couldn't get an accurate blood pressure because you kept shaking so much. And I was like, you didn't tell me. I was like, couldn't I? And I was talking really slow at this point because literally it just felt like, think about the drunkest you've ever been instantly, like clear-headed. And then like, I don't like feeling that way. And he was just like, it's what we had to do. We had to do that to get an accurate blood pressure. And I was just so mad about it. I just remember being so mad. And then Ryan came in and I looked at him. I'm like, I am high. I'm like, the room is spinning. I was like, but it's fine. And they were playing music, and I was like, okay, we're gonna get this baby out. They had to do it, whatever. At that point, so they start doing the C-section, and they were like, okay, the baby's about to come out or whatever, and Ryan was looking over, and I was like, don't, you might pass out. I just thought everything was a joke at that point, and I was because again, I wasn't clear-headed. And then I think when they got the baby out, I don't know how I knew. I think someone said something, and they're like, oh, he's here, and they showed him over the curtain real quick, and then they brought him back down, and he looked gray, and I'm sure babies look a little gray when they come out, but he wasn't crying. And it just got quiet. No one was talking. And I was like, why isn't he crying? I was like, why isn't he crying? And then Ryan was trying to calm me down. He was like, it's fine. It's fine. I'm like, no, he should be crying by now. Like, somebody tell me what's going on. Nobody said anything. And again, I don't know how long this was. I just remember one nurse saying, it's fine. It's fine. But like, I think she was just trying to calm me down because I was like freaking out at this point. And yeah, I don't know how long it was, and Ryan was just looking at me like wide-eyed, and he was trying to tell me it was okay, but like I could see in his eyes like he didn't know what was going on either. I mean, because we've never been through this before, and he like should have been crying. And then they had him over at the table, and I again could kind of see him, but there was a bunch of people around, and Ryan was trying to look, but then he was looking back at me and trying to calm me down. And finally he cried. And like we both started crying because I don't know how long it was. I wish I knew, but it was too long. But they brought him over to me, and he had the oxygen on at that point, and they're like, we have to take him down to the NICU because he's having breathing problems. And before I get to that, what actually happened during that time I found out was he pretty much overdosed on the Demerol they gave me, and they had to inject him with Narcan, is which they give opioid users who overdose. So they had that on hand, so they know that pain medicine that's a issue, that it can cause that, and he swallowed amniotic fluid because he was being sunny side up, so that's why I was having so much back labor, because he was faced the wrong way. So when they pulled him out, he swallowed a lot of amniotic fluid. But the fact that he was like overdosing on something that they had given me just moments before was crazy.
And something that you didn't want.
Right. I was like, no to fentanyl all day.
When did you find that out? When did you find out that they Narcaned him?
A little later, when the doctor came in and told me what happened, because I kept everyone I talked to, I'm like, why did the anesthesiologist hit me with Demerol? Why did he not tell me? I mean, probably because I signed a paper saying do what you got to do to get the baby out. But I was like, I don't know. So they had to squeeze him to try to get him to breathe. They squeezed him hard, and so it pressed air out into his, like, we found out later, his like outside of his heart and outside of his lungs, because they were basically doing like compressions to try to get his heart starting to get him to breathe. So that was really hard. And then the hardest part too, well, I think for Ryan, I told him, I was like, you have to go with him to the NICU. You have to follow him. He can't spend his first moments alone with strangers. And he looked so confused, because he didn't want to leave his wife on the table all cut open, and he didn't want his son to be alone. And I was like, I don't care. Like, you have to go be with him because I can't. And so he went, and some strange nurse, she wasn't strange, some stranger held my hand for the rest of the time. And I kept like falling asleep, and I'm like, I don't want to fall asleep because I thought I was gonna like die on the table. I don't know why. That's just my thought. I hadn't slept for hours, and I just, yeah.
totally
So,
valid with everything you'd been through to
yeah.
totally be terrified of what was going to happen to you.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Yeah.
that's awful.
But
It probably felt a little bit comforting having that nurse there.
yeah, she did. She held my
But
hand
I
and she's
mean,
like, "You're doing great."
oh,
Yeah. So Ryan went with Weston and they had him on his stomach and he was having a hard time breathing. Like you could tell he was having a hard time. And so we weren't out of the water yet. We didn't know how long he was going to be there. And so they finished up and you have to be in recovery for an hour before you can even go back to your room. And Ryan did come back. And that's when I was asking my questions. But again, I was still so drugged up. I was just like, why? Why did they? And they were trying to tell me. And then the funny thing is, the nurse is like, do you have any other questions? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I'm a PE teacher and I really like to work out. I was like, when can I start working out again? This was
get
in my
out.
I really didn't care. Like, no, I knew I wasn't going to work out for like weeks and weeks, like at least 8 weeks before I even start doing, I don't know, a little bit of anything. But no, I asked that because again, I was like out of my mind and I don't like being that way either. And so Ryan went back and they finally rolled me back to the room. And again, no baby. Haven't seen him yet. I saw him for like a couple seconds. Oh, and actually, before we get there, so when Ryan left to go down to the NICU, because this is where Michaela comes in to the story, he saw his mom. His mom knew right away that something was wrong. And I think I'll let you tell the part, Michaela, but you were on the phone with Carrie, right?
I was, yeah. I was driving across town actually to go to my stepsister's birthday party and hadn't heard any updates in a while. So I was like, I knew that Brian's parents were at the hospital and they had been there all day playing cards and hanging out. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna give them a call and check in and see what's going on. So I did. I was on the phone with Carrie, our mother-in-law, and she was, happy and perky and, feeling good about things and just explaining what they were doing, just that they were waiting. And while we were on the phone, Ryan came out to see them, and the tone in Carrie's voice, who, like I said, is always a very happy person, immediately changed. And she said, "Oh my gosh, Ryan's coming out here." And I'm driving and I'm like, "Oh, that doesn't sound good. What's going on?" She goes, I don't know, but his face isn't good. I know my son. This isn't a good look. I'll call you back." And then she just, she just hung up. And I wasn't with my husband at the time. This is his family. This is his brother and his nephew that's being born. And Carrie called me back a couple minutes later and kind of filled me in on everything and said, Danielle had to have an emergency C-section. This wasn't just, she had pushed for a long time and it wasn't happening, that there were some issues, some complications that led to the need for a C-section, and that Weston was born, but that there were some other issues that they were dealing with. He wasn't crying. He's in the NICU, blah, blah, blah. She's explaining all this to me, and you could just hear the tone in her voice of just, how do I support my son in this? And how do I support my daughter-in-law in this? And Ryan can be a very stoic person. He's in my experience, he's either really upbeat and happy or he's really stoic. So to hear his mom talk about seeing fear and sadness in his eyes, that hit me really hard. So and then of course I I got to the birthday party, which is where my husband was, and I had to pull him into the backyard and give him this news and let him know what was going on. So I mean, yeah, and we weren't there. We were across the country in a different state, and so to just kind of hear the secondhand and not be there to support you guys and not be there and know that we couldn't have done anything, but it was hard. That was kind of my side of things, and nothing nothing like you went through, Danielle, but it was really hard to hear and to just have to sit there and wait and wonder like what's happening with our family. But
I remember texting you, Michaela, and we were texting asking for updates of what was going on. And you told us about the call with Carrie and that you hadn't heard again. I don't know how long it had been. in between those calls, but we were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And Danielle, I'd met you at the bachelorette party, but other than that, like, we talked to you a bunch, but we were like, what's happening? Oh my gosh, what's wrong with, the situation? What's going on? And we are like, come on, Michaela, get more information for
I was
us.
actually
What's
just able to
happening?
pull up the text message that you sent all of us about it. It's really long. I mean,
Wow, that's impressive.
said we got a cute text from Danielle saying she was able to start pushing. And then 2 hours later, we were told she went in for a C-section. When Weston came out, he was struggling to breathe, so they sent him to the NICU. So, and a couple other things. But then there's little pictures of you guys too. So sweet. So we were all cheering you on
So
from afar,
cute.
Danielle.
Yep. You had a whole team rallying you on back here that you didn't even know about.
That's amazing. And your sister, Lexi, and Matt, her husband, I know that they said a prayer for us, and that meant a lot too. I found, I think you told us that.
Yep. So when I pulled Bryce aside to tell him it was at a family event, and my sister was wondering what was going on, so her and her husband came out. I filled them in, and yeah, the four of us, there in the backyard in the middle of this birthday party, said a quick prayer for you guys. So
Yeah.
it was a full family affair across state lines.
And to be clear, I never actually pushed once. I know, like, there was talk that I pushed, but I was about to push, and they're like, no, we're not. We're just going to go to a C-section. Yeah, and then the thing is, it's funny because perspective, right? My mom and dad had, I think, just walked in, and my sister just walked into the hospital when Ryan had walked out, and my mom was like, I know Ryan had a lot going on, but we weren't filled in. We didn't know what was going on. It's like, I just remember, I just bowed my head and I prayed. But just recently over Thanksgiving break, I actually talked to Carrie, and she was telling me about the conversation that Ryan was having with her. And he was like crying and saying, I don't know what to do, Mom. Mom, what do I do? Like, do I stay with Danielle or do I go to the NICU? Like, basically just went to ask his mom, like, for help. And we were both bawling at this point when she was telling me that. And so, yeah, so he went to the NICU. And then later when they rolled me into the room and everyone walked in, I'm so tired at this point. I haven't slept. Also on drugs. And as soon as I saw my mom, I started bawling. And I'm like, thought like I was a failure. Like, this was my fault. And she was hugging me and like telling me, like, no, it's not. Like, you did good. But it was so hard. I couldn't help to blame myself. Like, had I done something different, maybe I should have just went home. Maybe I shouldn't have been induced. Maybe I shouldn't got the epidural. Of course, these things are going through my head. And like, what could I have done different to prevent this? And so I struggled with that a lot. And the first time I really got to see Weston besides in the OR was through FaceTime, because when you're after an epidural, they do not let you leave your bed for at least 2 hours after an hour of in recovery. So I couldn't get out of bed. And so I just started crying and I was like, hey, baby. And he sounded like he recognized my voice and he was looking around for me and I couldn't hold him. He was downstairs, a whole floor down from me. And then I think that was the hardest. And I hold a lot of regret not being able to hold him in his first moments of life. And I really struggle with that still. But finally, every time the nurse came in to check on me, I'm like, can you please let me go? Like, please, like, look, I can move my feet. She's like, yeah, you could move your feet, but if you try to stand, you're going to fall down. Like, every time. And finally, she let me go probably 15 minutes earlier than I was supposed to. She's like, don't tell anyone. She's like, it's against my judgment, but she let me get in a wheelchair and they got to wheel me down with my pee bag. It's the worst. Wheel me downstairs.
The best part about a C-section.
And that thing was just out there. Let me just tell you a hack that I actually learned from my father-in-law who had to have surgery. He had a little satchel and you just put it in there, like a little bag. No one told me this. I just have it hanging outside my gown. It's great. But so I finally got to go. But they said that I couldn't hold him. They said maybe tomorrow. And it was really sad to see him. They couldn't find a vein, and they poked this poor boy everywhere trying to find a vein, and he had the IV on the top of his head. He
Oh,
was hooked up to a bunch of wires, like his heart rate monitor and all the things. And we asked how long will he be there, and it's like it depends. We've seen this before. It's either going to be could be a couple days, could be several weeks, and so we had no answers.
when they came in and they said, "Okay, let's just do the C-section now," were you like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it," or were you like, did you fight it a little? Like, how did that go?
I was very apprehensive. Yeah, I asked a lot of questions. I'm like, why? Like, why can't I push? And the seriousness in her face, though, was like, you are going to be pushing for 4 hours, and I still see this either not turning out how you want it. Might be hard on the baby, and might have to go to an emergency C-section where we have to rush you and like get that baby out however, we need to. So I don't know. Maybe I should have asked more questions, but
No,
I
no,
think
no, no. I was just
yeah.
wondering because maybe we talked about this in the last episode. Like, I didn't have a birth plan. I was just like, get the baby out healthy however you want. If you want to do a C-section without even me trying to push, like, I was fine with that. So I'm just wondering, because you had a plan, do you feel like that changed anything, and could it have gone a different way had you not had the plan? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just expected it to be one way, and I knew that it could change, and however, but I guess I really wasn't. I didn't believe that would happen. I thought I had a really healthy pregnancy all the way up, and so I just didn't think that I would be going into a C-section, or also just didn't want to be induced. But I think it was because they were watching that. They can see the heart rate monitor wherever they're at. They have my heart
Yeah.
rate and his, and she just said during my contractions they were like dropping significantly to the point where they were afraid it was going to be too much on Weston if I was pushing like just too hard on him.
Mm-hmm.
I was really nervous about it, but
So Danielle, just a question. So you said that his heart rate was dropping during the contractions, and then was his heart rate recovering after the contractions?
yeah, except the one time that they gave me the epidural, it dropped and it wasn't coming back up until they gave me atropine. I was going to tell you what Weston had. I thought I had it written down. It was like a big, maybe I didn't put it in here.
You did. A pneumothorax and a pneumomediastinum.
So when they pressed, when they were giving him compressions, it sent air into his lungs and outside of his heart. And Michaela's going to tell us the terminology for that.
The medical terms were a pneumothorax and a pneumomediastinum. So yeah, air in the thorax and air in the mediastinum area.
So that was Friday, and I didn't get to hold him until the next day. So he was born at 6 p.m. on the 10th, and I wasn't able to hold him until the 11th, about lunchtime. I was also having to pump, and I was actually, the nurses were impressed about how much colostrum I was getting out. I'm like, I don't know, like it was not I was like, it's in this little tube. And they're like, that's great. I'm like, it's like this much. But yeah, I was pumping and that hurt. And I didn't know what I was doing. No one told me how to do the settings on the pump, that the hospital pump, because I didn't have mine there with me. And so we had to supplement with a bottle. So then that leads into breastfeeding, which would be a whole other topic. And I felt like it was difficult for me from the get-go because I didn't get the golden hour. I didn't get to hold the baby forever. It felt like Ryan did say the first time he really heard Weston cry, because he wasn't really crying that much. People were handling him, changing his diapers, and they all had like rubber gloves on, but he really didn't get that like full on touch until I got to hold him the next day. And then they're like, okay, we have to do this. We got to check his vitals or something. And they took him away from me, and he started crying. Like he was like, no, like I want my mom. And I felt the same too. So that was Friday, right? And then we were there for 4 days. So he was actually, the air went away. They did x-rays and he recovered really quickly, and we were really thankful and really blessed that, he recovered so quickly. And in the NICU, they have these like beads that you can make for like how long you've been in the NICU and all those things. And Ryan was thinking about it, but then of course we go to like, well, it wasn't that bad. Like, so he was like, he didn't make one because it's like, well, he was only in there for a few days, and some of these babies have been where they were born early and they've been here for months. And so it's like when you put it in perspective, it's like, oh, well, I was even nervous about sharing my story and still am. I'm just like, people are going to hear it and be like, wow, well, that's story. Look, you should hear mine. And I don't know. I don't know why I feel that way, but like,
Your story is your story, and it's worth sharing.
It's
Yeah, you're not
absolutely
trying to
worth
compare it.
sharing. No, and that is so. I have yet to hear a birth story that was smooth sailing. And I will tell you, I have had people who don't tell their birth stories. And I'm like, there's a catch there. Something happened that they're scarred from and they don't want to talk about it. Maybe you know what, that's not fair to say. Maybe they had a great birth. Maybe it went super fast and great and everything was perfect. But I mean, it is incredible what we put our bodies through. Like Michaela said, your story is your story. Don't ever discount it. That is extremely traumatic. And if you went to a therapist and talked to them about it, they'd be like, lady, that is nothing to be embarrassed about, or nothing to say that wasn't scary, because that's wow. And
yeah,
I mean, it's, like, it's easy when you're not the one who has been through it to be like, oh, you shouldn't feel bad about not holding him right away because, like, look how great it is now. And you've gotten all these hugs and kisses and everything like that now. And you can't go back and change it. But I get it. Like, I totally get it. When we get to my birth story, I'll tell you my regrets about certain things I did, right? We all have those. And, look how awesome of a parent you are now. And it's like you said before, you forget about it, so then you can go for the second if you want a second, and you're like, so worth it. It was so worth it. I mean, yeah, it was so terrifying and so traumatic, but it was like, you wouldn't give it back for a second to get what you have now.
Yeah, totally worth it. I'd do it again exactly that way if that meant that I get Weston. But yeah, it was hard, and I guess I do know why. It's just like I couldn't talk about it. I didn't post anything. I didn't even text my friends that I had a baby. They're like wondering if I was okay. I think it was a whole 7 days. Like, they were like, is Weston here? Are you doing okay? And I was like, yeah, we had complications, but I didn't want to talk about it. So I literally just made a post and like posted it out there. And I'm not that kind of person that posts things or my like personal life on like super personal on Facebook or anything of that sort. But it's just, I seriously didn't want to talk about it. So I'm like, here it is. You can read it. You can send it to family. But that was my story. I'm sure I missed something, but that's the gist of it. I will say one other regret that I have, and people are like, you shouldn't feel that way. And Michaela, but my mom was coming in to see me, and I guess the thought around it, I was in the room, so I didn't know. Ryan's parents had been there all day playing cards, like Michaela said, and my mom wanted to come in and see me. And then I guess Ryan was like, well, we haven't let my parents come in and see us either. So they're like, she's just resting. And so he sent her away with flowers. And my mom cried for the rest of the day, and it made me sad. And I was like, I should have just let her come in and say hi. She just wanted to, had been stressed all day and was worried like something was wrong. So I do feel bad about not having my mom like come in and like say hi beforehand. But in the moment, I was stressed. I didn't want anybody there. I was like, tell your parents to like go to our house and play cards. Because I'm like, I really feel nervous. Like, I need to be pushing this baby out anytime. And they're just sitting there. They've been sitting there all day. Hopefully they were comfortable.
I was just having a conversation about the whole hospital thing and having visitors and how you feel about that. And I wonder, would you do, other than your mom, would you do anything different than how you did things as far as hospital visitors? Yes, no, whatever.
I don't know. It's just hard because we don't have family around. So it's not like they can go home and hang out at their house, for a while. Like I really did enjoy the help. And they weren't even able to come into our room. I mean, they were able to come into our room, but the baby wasn't there. I could only have so many people in the NICU. I think there could only be 3 of us. So sometimes it would just be me and 2 other people, or Ryan, and so it wasn't a lot of visitors there. I will say that we did have a very full house. My parents stayed here, and my sister was living here at the time. And then Michaela and Bryce came, and then it was Brian's parents and grandmother. And it was great when there was shifts, if my parents would go out and do stuff, and then, but when we were all here, it was just, for me, I think Ryan liked it because they were playing games, and it was great. I was tired. I wanted to be on my couch topless to breastfeed, but I felt like I had to go to another room. And so I felt already feeling isolated. I was having a hard time breastfeeding. And so it was really hard. I was going through postpartum for sure. So maybe next time have it staggered. Maybe my parents here or my
And
mom.
later.
And later. But now I'm going to have somebody come and because we've got Weston. So if we do have another, we'll have to have somebody here for sure. But yeah,
Yep.
It's just, I felt like I was having to entertain, even though they were cooking and cleaning for me. I felt like I played a couple games, but I was so exhausted. I would go upstairs and cry by myself. Just because it was just overwhelming. I get overwhelmed pretty easily with a lot of people. So, but I
was a lot.
Overstimulated.
Yeah.
I would be
There we go.
overstimulated for sure. Yeah.
Well, and then of course all of us are constantly, how are you doing? Are you okay? Can we get you anything? Do you need anything? And we're all trying to be helpful, but at the end of the day, it's like, what would be helpful is if you just stop talking to me. But of course, nobody's going to say that, right?
No.
Although,
no.
had you said that, we would have totally understood.
Yeah. I think the other thing I really regret was I felt the need when Weston woke up and after he breastfed that I needed to pass the baby off because they were there visiting. So Weston got passed around, which is fine. But then also I'm like, but I want to hold him. But now he's like, oh, he's hungry. Here he is. And so I really had a hard time, I think, with that. And so maybe that's why my breastfeeding journey was a little rough, had a rough start. But when everyone left, it was quiet. I'm like, luckily, Bryce and Michaela, I think it was, did you help make breakfast burritos?
We did. We made a ton of breakfast burritos right before we left.
That was the best. So we were heating this
up.
up.
The Bryce specialty.
Yes, that was amazing. And they were in the freezer, and that was our breakfast every morning for however many weeks it lasted. But that was amazing.
That's definitely something I would suggest to people, is to take meals when people offer frozen meals or to cater in food for you, order you Uber Eats or something. Do it. It's amazing to take that.
Danielle, what was it like for you and for Ryan when they told you that Weston was going to be getting out of the NICU?
We were definitely excited. I probably cried. I was just happy to get home and to sleep in my own bed and to have Weston close, next to me. So we were definitely just very thankful. And I guess surprised because a couple of days before, they're like, well, I don't know if it's going to be several weeks or just a few days. But it was looking up because, I think after a day or two, he was able to get off his IV and other things. It was so hard to hold him with all those wires. And so when they were starting to take things off, I was like, oh, this is great. So we were definitely super excited and just.
Was there any special
exhausted.
care that you had to give Weston when you guys first went home?
No, he full recovery, normal baby. So of course I was worried. I was like, what if something's wrong with his heart or he stops breathing? But I think that's normal. bringing a newborn baby home and a new mom and not knowing anything. But no, luckily he was completely healed or, better. So
That's awesome. I mean, I'm so sorry that that's what you guys had to
yeah.
go through to get him here, but I'm glad that he had a quick recovery and you guys were reunited as a family so shortly after.
I'm so glad that both you and him are healthy and happy, and that story has a good ending, because like you said, that's not always the case for people, and want to be sensitive to that. But regardless, Danielle, you're very brave for sharing your story, so thank you. I know it's hard.
Well, thank you for listening and giving me the space to tell it. I feel like I've drawn it out a little. It's because it's been almost a year, and it's just like, oh yeah, that did happen. but yeah, Michaela knows. Like, I couldn't talk about it. It was just the worst at the time.
I don't think that I knew the full story or like all of the details until you posted that post, which, like you said, was a couple weeks later or whatever. And I read that and I was like, wow, I knew some of that stuff happened, but that was really intense. So, yeah, I can second that. I know that it was really hard to talk about.
Do we want to go into our hot topic?
Sure. Okay, so for the hot topic this week, I was thinking about talking a little bit about imposter syndrome. You can get this really with anything, your job, if you're an athlete, whatever it is, and even being a mom as well. So it's just basically that you feel like you're not qualified for something when you actually are. And I used to feel this way about work as a teacher. I was like in year 7, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what I'm doing. But I did. I would get good ratings and all the things. So I knew, but I just felt like I wasn't good enough, and we get those feelings a lot. But I'm actually starting to feel that way a little bit as a mom, as having a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not qualified. Like, I am qualified to be a mom. I gave birth and I feel like I'm good at it. But when I compare myself, which we should not do, when I compare myself to others, I'm like, well, they have way more experience. And I was wondering if you felt this way, like if y'all felt this way also. Because this week, actually, I went to dinner with a friend. It was her birthday, and she had other friends there, and I knew most of them. And she was like, Danielle, she's has this podcast with these other moms, and it's really good, and you should listen to it. And then, of course, like, I don't want the attention on me, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just something that I do. It's fun. And I just kind of like pushed it off. Like, I don't want to talk about it, which I should be, because I am really proud that we're doing this and that we're having that we have this space. But me just kind of going into my shell, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it with like all these people at the table. They're probably thinking, oh wow. And so she was like, no, you should definitely tell people about it and have them listen, because it's good. And she was like telling everyone what it was. And some girls did look it up and like downloaded it. But I guess my thought was, the reason I felt this way is because, like, the mom sitting next to me, she has 3 teenage boys. The other mom sitting over here, I just met, she has 3 kids under 4 and is a stay-at-home mom and is thinking about homeschooling. And then, then there was other 2 women that have kids like college age. I'm like, so why would they want to listen to me when I've just been a mom for just a little, like almost a year? And I get frustrated at myself. I'm like, I'm just as qualified. I've been through things. Just because I don't have as much as experience, but I should be proud of what we're doing and like telling everybody, like, listen to my podcast. And so I just wonder, am I the only one that feels that way, or do you feel that way too?
I get imposter syndrome really, really bad in pretty much every aspect of my life. And yes, being a mom, I'm like, I have no qualifications to sit here and to talk about my experience being a mom. Like, all I want to do is maybe help one person relate or feel like they're not alone in their situation. Because I don't know that I have the skill set or expertise or any of that. I feel like I don't know anything and I'm just learning as I go. And so even like when Stephen will say like you're a good mom, I'm like, ugh, like I don't know. Am I? Like, why would you say that? What have I done to be a good mom? So yeah, I you are not alone in that, Danielle, and I think it's pretty normal. Especially because like I had a friend tell me one time that, and it stuck with me. It was so impactful. But she said that, so her daughter's 13 now, but she said that as she was raising her daughter and they would have their struggles, she would be like, listen, this is the first time I've been a mom to a 10-year-old. And this is the first time you've been a 10-year-old. So we're figuring this out together. And I just love that so much because sometimes I'll look at Wes and I'm like, this is the first time I'm a mom to a 1-year-old. And this is the first time you've been a 1-year-old. And we're both experiencing a lot right now. And we're trying this together. Um, so I thought that that was like just such a graceful way of looking at motherhood. And I've tried to remember that through a lot of different situations. But no, I definitely don't feel qualified to talk about anything. And to anyone listening, I just want people to know that they're not alone. And hopefully we can just be your friends that you listen to on Spotify and be like, oh, yeah, I've gone through that too. Or, yeah, I share that perspective.
I think it's pretty amazing too to see moms of older kids than our kids to see our babies and they're like, oh, baby stage, I miss that so much, right? And I think it would be fun for them to kind of listen back to us going through this experience again and for them to relive it, but also to be like, oh yeah, I remember worrying about that and it turning out to be absolutely nothing, right? And I think that's such a, not to toot our own horns, but this is fun. I mean, we're having fun. I really look forward to our recording sessions. I really look forward to talking about all of these things. And it makes my brain kind of turn in the ways of like, I never thought about doing that, or trying to whatever, parent this way or that way or the other thing. But yes, imposter syndrome, 100%. Like, who knows if I'm doing it right, right? Like, I've talked about this many times of like, talking to my therapist constantly being like, I just don't want to mess them up. I don't want them to have to go into therapy because of some bad decision because of something I read online just once. She's like, well, I mean, I think it's healthy to go to therapy. It's okay if they have to go to therapy because that's just the nature of the beast, but you're doing the best that you can. And you just have to be comfortable in yourself. And like, Danielle, like I think even just watching you from our first episode to now, like you can tell your confidence is getting better. And I think that's so awesome to watch. And it's so much fun to see you making new friends. I mean, that is so hard to do. Like people ask all the time, oh, have you met parents through Hannah's daycare? I'm like, nope, none of us want to talk to each other. Like it's hard to make friends. It's worse than dating, I think. And it took me a long time to find my husband. So, I think yes, totally imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome at my work right now really badly because I'm like, I am not qualified to be doing this at all. And it's just trying to keep up and pretend like I know what I'm doing until we figure it out. And I don't know that we ever will figure it out. So we probably will have imposter syndrome forever, but at least we'll have each other.
I feel like women in general really struggle with imposter syndrome. So
I was
you
going to say the
add
same.
being a mom on top of that and being responsible for another human's life. And obviously I don't have a child, I'm not a mom, but I see enough of comparison with just women and how to be the right type of woman that you add the complexity of raising a human, and if you don't do that to the standards of somebody else, that is just one more huge reason for women to compare each other and to hate on each other. And that continues to foster that idea of this imposter syndrome of like, oh well, somebody else is doing that, they seem to be doing it easier or better, I must not be doing it right, I must not be qualified. So shout out to all the women, stop, you are qualified, you are capable, and you're doing a great job.
I think that that's a great point, Michaela. I think that it has, like when I criticize other people, it's 100% internal struggles that I have of I'm not doing it right, right? Like, and I'm not trying to call you out, Leah, at all by any means. And so this is, I'm sorry if it comes off that way, and we can totally cut this part. But like when you're like, yeah, we didn't let Wes cry it out for more than 9 minutes. I was like, I let Aubrey go for 3 hours. Like, neglect, come arrest me. I'm the worst parent ever, right? Like,
I'm
that's
so
how
sorry.
I took it. But at the same time, it's like, no. And that's what I'm trying to say is like, whatever, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, it's not like Aubrey's going to come to me when she's 15 and be like, you let me cry for 3 hours when I was 4 months old, like that's not going to happen. But we as women do that to ourselves. Cause like I'll say things to Brandon all the time and he'll be like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. I'm like, it's a big deal to me. It's a big deal to me, right? Like, we just want to be perfect and we want to raise the perfect child that does not exist except for me. I was just the perfect child, obviously. Just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like we put so much pressure on ourselves to be amazing, perfect people. We want people to think we're amazing, perfect people. And
That's the thing, is that we try so hard to be amazing, perfect people according to somebody else's standards.
right. Good
That's
point.
where we go wrong.
Good.
Stop doing that. Me too. Stop doing that.
That's why I'm like afraid to even put myself out there, because I just am, I guess, the fear of being rejected or like, oh, wow, she's weird or a little quirky. I don't know. So I just like, that's why I'm so shy. I'm just like afraid of what people will think. And that's not okay.
The most ridiculous thing, though, is that we all do it. Like, it's actually normal to be weird, and it's normal to be awkward, and it's normal to have these reservations and these fears. And every single one of us does it, but we still see it as a problem. So,
I will tell
good to
you,
talk about it.
it's gotten so much better for me being a mom, being a parent. That has gone away a lot more, like I care less about what other people think about me because I'm like, at least my kids like me. Well, yeah, because I feed them, like, right. But like, it's really nice to get into that space of feeling comfortable in your own skin at points and living in the moment, because that is not something I've ever done before. And I love it. I love being in that circle right now I mean, we've got a good support system here too. You guys are so supportive when you probably are like, what? Why is she doing that? Right. But it's awesome. And you get at a certain point, I hope you get to the point where you're doing the best that you can, and you're going to make mistakes. There's just no way around it. And Danielle, like, I mean, I've tooted your horn so many times. That sounds really dirty. I like so many times been like, I have no idea how you can be a stay-at-home mom. I just like you deserve a raise. You deserve so many accolades for being able to do that, because honestly, I would be a parent I wouldn't be proud of at all if I had to be a stay-at-home mom. I know my patience level is really, really tough, and you're incredible, and I think that's awesome, and I hope you understand that. I hope you like truly believe me when I say that. I think it's incredible.
Thank
And
you.
Leah, you working full time and being an incredible mom to Wesson, and your dedication to the clean lifestyle that you live and the foods that you make him and the foods that you provide for him with working full time, like, it's just, it's awesome. It's so fun, and like, it's weird to be like, I'm so proud of them. Right. But I'm like, you guys are incredible. We're incredible people. We are. And we don't say that about ourselves, obviously, but believe me when I say it, right? Like, even when Brandon gives me props and was like, oh, you're such a good mom. Like, what? No, I'm not a good mom. I could be doing so much better. I could be, whatever, growing my own corn in the backyard or something. We could always be doing better, but we need to take compliments. That's another thing I think women aren't great at, is taking compliments.
Well, you're doing awesome too, Lisa. And as Michelle would say, she's not here today, but You should be so proud of yourself because, I mean, you have 2 under 2 or, right around 2. No, it's I don't even know how you do that. Like with 2, Weston is a lot, just 1, and he's just 1. And so we're thinking about having more. And I'm like, that seems impossible, but I know it can be done. And I think you're doing it gracefully and doing an amazing job.
All right. So do we want to wrap up with answering our question that we had last week of how many hours Leah pumped throughout her entire pump journey?
My guess was 1,002 hours.
And I did some really great math and got to I think
58,000 hours was your initial guess.
Well, it was like 58,000.
Like,
Because
how many
minutes
years
and hours
would 58,000 hours be?
I think that would have been 6 years. Like 6 years of like constantly like 24 hours a day for 356 days.
65.
Yeah. 365. It's not 356.
Man, we are not good at numbers.
Yeah. I usually am decent at numbers, but yeah, I was not right. I finally then realized I was calculating minutes and not hours. So hours, I got to 993, I believe.
973 was your hours guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Based off their guesses, I'm just going to go, gosh, do I want to do Price is Right rules here?
Yeah, right.
Or somewhere in between? I'm going to go somewhere in between. My favorite number is 9, so I'm going to go 999.
We've got 973, 999, and 1,002, and 58,000. But the actual winner is going to be 892 hours spent pumping over the last year.
I should have done Price is Right rules.
That's
Wow.
bananas to think about.
892 hours.
Okay, so let's quickly do the math. 892 divided by 24. It's 37 days.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of pumping.
Over a month. Women are amazing.
Over a month. Oh, over a month.
Like, 37
all these things
days
get weird when it gets later past our bedtime.
It is past our bedtime.
I was like, yeah, she pumps for over a month. Like,
not 12 months to be exact.
Yeah. Okay.
So just
we got there.
to revisit, did we mention the cabbage on the last episode?
You did. How did that go?
So
it smelled great?
It wasn't very potent, but I deliberately waited because I have a funny relationship with my father-in-law, and I will do anything in my power to make him squirm and just to get a reaction out of him because I think it's hilarious. And so they were here and going to the grocery store, and I overheard them talking in the hallway. They're like, okay, we're going to go to the grocery store. And I popped out and I was like, hey, can you get me some cabbage? They're like, he's like, okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So then he comes back and they're like, so what's the cabbage for? And I was like, oh, I've got it in my bra right now. He was like, what? Excuse me? And then we went down this deep dive through the internet of, while we're at dinner, my father-in-law Googling cabbage to dry up for breastfeeding. So he learned something new. And I just over the course of the weekend would be like, yeah, I've got cabbage on, just to get that little squirm out of him. It was definitely the highlight. Like 10 out of 10 recommend. It did provide some like pain relief. I'm still not fully dried up yet. I'm still a little engorged and pumping and releasing a little bit, but it definitely the cold leaves and the compress, I think just like that was a relief. So it's a cheap solution, temporary relief. Recommend it.
Should we link to it? Should we link to it on Amazon? Cabbage leaves?
Is it organic cabbage?
Yeah, is there a certain kind? Yeah, green, red. I mean, is there a certain type of cabbage that works better?
Yes. green leaf cabbage. You can find it at your local grocery store.
That's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to our episode today and just giving me the space to share my story. And I really would love to hear your birthing stories too. So if you would like to email us at hello@momjeansthepodcast.com, we would love to read your stories. Also, if you want to follow us, you can follow us at momjeansthepodcast on Instagram and TikTok. Come back next time for some more of our birthing stories that we're going to share with you. And we can't wait for you to listen. And that wraps up this week's episode of Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening.